think it means that you'll be, not treating people through religious leaders as such, but going from them directly. But can that work? I mean, just to give you a point of view, I was canvassing just yesterday in Shadwell, which is in the heart of Bengali London, and you had whole estates of Bengali British immigrants who've come in, and it's quite clear that certain people took lines from other people. Now, how are you going to break through to them?
Well, our whole approach to community cohesion and the security of the country is based on how we can build a stronger society together, so we don't have to resort to the kinds of repressive legislation that this government seems to think is the way forward. And in order to do that, we need to correct one of the more serious mistakes that's been made over the past probably 5 to 10 years, which is dealing with self-appointed and often unrepresentative religious groups as the government's way of dealing with Muslim communities of Britain.
Can I say,
it's focused only on the religious aspect of their identity and ignored the non-religious aspect of their identity. And this is something they have sometimes done abroad as well, where they think that the way to reach out to countries where people happen to be Muslim is purely through a religious leadership, instead of focusing on aspects that both, for example, British and Indonesian businessmen might share. There's too much emphasis on trying to speak to the Indonesian religious leadership.
I quite agree, but I think actually it extends beyond that. The problem is an over-concentration on faith. The vast majority of the population are agnostics. I'm a devout atheist, and I think there's a real problem in the amount of attention given to faith over reason in our society. I would like to send my child to a reason school. I don't have that option. I'm looked at as weird if I suggest it. And there is a whole business you choose, like you go private or you go God, or you pretend to be religious to get into a good religious school in central London. That, I think, is a terrible state of affairs, forcing people into religion on false basis simply to get a decent education. So I think an overemphasis on religion in general has been the bane of this government. And we need to remember the importance of reason and the Enlightenment overall, and the protection of the values in the Enlightenment.
Well, this is a false antithesis that's being set up, the notion that reason and enlightenment stand on the opposite end of the spectrum from faith. And as you know from the Regensburg Address and many, many other things, faith and reason are not opposites. Well, not regarded as being so by large swathes of this country and others. And once again, the problem is not religion as a whole, the problem is Islamism. It is political Islam. That is the problem. We do not have a great problem in this country with extreme Hindus.
Douglas has got a point, hasn't he, Dan? I mean, forget about America for one moment. In this country, the problem is Islamic fundamentalism, isn't it? That's the community, if you like, that is the most cause for concern.
Well, indeed, but if you look at the countries where we have been doing our conquering and our dominating, it isn't India. They got rid of us 60 years ago. If you look at
so in your view, terrorism is absolutely caused by foreign policy?
Not entirely, but it's a huge factor. And indeed, our own intelligence services said so in advance of the Iraq War. This is not a George Galloway position. If you look at the American CIA man Sher's book, Imperial Hubris, he wrote that Bin Laden was. It was as if Bin Laden had been sitting in a cave chanting with mind control over Bush, "Please invade Iraq." That's the view of the CIA.
One man, the CIA, in the CIA, in any case.
The CIA is a bunch of useless liberals. We know that, and should be closed down, I'm sure, and replaced by American
enterprises. I'm glad you agree.
Wonderful, we reached an agreement on that.
We agree on that point.
Foreign policy,
useless and overfunded
foreign policy,
bureaucracy.
the cause of terrorism?
No, of course not. I mean, is it an aggravating factor? Yes, probably. But then you're offered the choice of whether or not you have the chance to run your own foreign policy on your own terms as you see fit, and see fit to protect your own people and to help people in other countries, or you decide to have that policy dictated by people who let off car bombs in Baghdad or London or anywhere else. So that is the choice being offered you if people decide that we honestly ought to listen to Islamist nutcases.
But Dan is going to be disappointed, because this is where the machinery of government and the bureaucracy does actually matter. Because what the government should have done on receiving its assessment from its own spies that the Iraq War might aggravate terrorism, they should have then taken security measures to deal with that. Exactly. You can't act in the world and simply run away every time that someone else might disagree with your policy. But you can take steps defending. They could have spent more. They could have spent more time beefing up the security services better to address the threat that they'd said would happen.
Okay.
They needed to take steps in Iraq to better plan for the post-conflict phase.
Does that mean the Conservative Party does accept that foreign policies cause terrorism?
We don't accept anything so simplistic. Terrorists are of course motivated by a number of factors. One of which has been the Iraq War, and David Cameron has said as much. But it's much more complicated than that, and I don't think you get anything by taking the simplistic approach of saying this is simply a foreign policy problem. Terrorism is simply a foreign policy problem. It's not, it needs to be continually repeated. But September 11th happened before our invasion of Afghanistan. We invaded Afghanistan in order to deny this sanctuary the Taliban had been given Al-Qaeda that allowed them to launch such attacks.
Indeed, but let's be clear. The American forces staying in Saudi Arabia after the 1991 Gulf War, was the reason that bin Laden and company decided this particular extremist wing. It isn't a question of Islamist as a whole. We're dealing with a particular faction within a faction of Sunni Islam with respect to most of this. And most Islamic people, are as extreme as you or I might be Church of England. They like their drink and their pork and the rest of it. So let's not get carried away with this. But I must return to this question. It is only Islam. I had the great pleasure of being at John Bolton, President Bush's, one of his favourite diplomats, his confirmation hearing with Jesse Helms. And Jesse Helms, out front, he said, people have criticised me, and I won't do a South Carolina accent here, people have criticised me, he said, Jesse, for saying that the end times of the Book of Revelations are coming, and that John Bolton is the sort of person I want to have standing beside me in those times, and I reiterate those times are coming. John Bolton is the sort of person I want to have beside me at that time. And he was chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, elected by his peers in the Republican Party, and nobody came out with a white coat and took him away. That's the ideology driving this administration.
Last word on the subject?
Well, it's definitely not the ideology driving this administration, otherwise they'd be doing different things. They'd probably be doing them more successfully, and they would be more open about what they're doing. The fact is that the White House, the current administration in Washington, does tend to dive between policy and policy. It comes over all liberal interventionists, but then rushes back to an old-school realist style of approach when things go badly wrong. If it had any really clear drive like that, we would see it. As it is, we see a strange flip-flopping inability to stick the course on any one particular direction, and I think that's
an ideology. I wouldn't say the ideology, so I'd agree with you there.
Right, we've reached agreement. I'm going to stop it there at the moment in time. Well, let's move over to your articles. Dan, let's start with you, because you have news of a rather interesting conference.
We just had a conference on corporate accountability at SOAS, where we were discussing Adam Smith's proposition that the limited liability formula in the modern corporation is a fundamental violation of rights, as he put it, to allow one group of people to benefit simply for their own profit by being excluded from the general rules of society is simply not reasonable. And we are, in our discussions, it became clear that more and more people from different walks of life and different continents held the same view, that we have created a tyranny of the unaccountable few in the name of liberalism and democracy, because the owners of corporations cannot be held accountable in law for their actions. You only, in this model, as I'm sure we all know, are liable for the amount of money you put into the company. And the classic example, most recently, is the Fair Pact, but also those poor men up in Northwick Park who suffered terribly in an experiment that went wrong. The owners of the company shut the company down, so the liability they faced was removed, and set up a new company the next day. That is allowed, nothing wrong with that legally, and that isn't a bad apple case. It simply points to the broader problem that we've created. And then when we say we're exporting freedom, we're actually exporting a system that is a boon to every kleptocracy and post-tribal elite who find in the heart of this freedom a means of protecting their wealth permanently from any legal recourse.
Well, Douglas, I've heard that's a fascinating skid on things, and certainly something I haven't heard before in that sense. So, I mean, it's interesting that you held that conference there. Are we exporting, authoritarianism through capitalism? Is that the way?
No idea. It's a long time since I was able to stomach any long event at SOAS.
A long time since you were able to stomach any long event at SOAS. Well, in terms of sort of broad brush dismissal of one of the world's top universities.
Oh,
yeah,
Is it? I wasn't aware of that.
Pretty shocking. What was the conclusion then? I mean, other than we are doing
Oh,
this.
more research, of course.
More research. Another conference.
More research,
Another conference.
Garvin, what's your...
Didn't they look into the difference between the civil and the criminal law here? And if you have a well-functioning state where there is the rule of law, people can be held accountable even if they own companies for breaking the criminal law.
No,
if you have a badly run state,
no, if you own a company that carries out criminal acts, you have no liability whatever. Yeah. And of course, all the parts of the world we are exporting the corporate-only model, this corporate totalitarianism that is being foisted on the planet at the moment. We're putting a situation which is worse than the aristocracy before the French Revolution, because at least those aristocrats were accountable to the king.
More research needed. Garvin, your story.
Right. In the next couple of weeks, there are going to be local elections in Lebanon, and this is very interesting because it's the first serious test of public opinion there since last summer's war and since the campaign of assassinations against pro-government deputies. And it will be very interesting to see whether Hezbollah is able to be as effective a politically organised force as it used to be. There was a fascinating poll released about a year ago where they asked Lebanese people from the various religious communities which side they thought won the war last summer. And a majority of Shiites thought Hezbollah had won, but a majority of Sunnis and Christians thought Israel had won.
That's interesting. Douglas, Lebanon dangerously split. We've seen various attempts to topple the government. Dare to make a prediction about this local election result?
Hard to say. I haven't been out there for a year or so, and I'm assured by friends who are there and have just come back that, yes, feeling on the ground against Hezbollah is sort of satisfyingly high.
Really?
I hope that remains the case. I hope they realise the extent to which Hezbollah, much like Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, has used their country as a launch pad and should take responsibility when the people it launches against hit back.
I think, I haven't been out there, but I think Hezbollah probably did lose quite badly. It's interesting, John Negroponte, then head of American intelligence coordination, said that Hezbollah was the principal deterrent that Iran had to America launching an attack against Iran. I think we've seen the administration carrying a very successful policy of removing Syria and a Syrian-dominated government from Beirut, isolating.
I don't think you can say that.
The reduction of Hezbollah, which may all be very good things, and I wouldn't be in the least surprised if we do find ourselves in a major war with Iran sooner rather than later.
Well, let's
the Syrian government the pro-Syrian government in Lebanon wasn't removed by act of active American foreign policy. The United States gave its support to a popular movement that arose after the assassination of their Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. And that popular support meant that Syria wasn't able to use the kind of military force to suppress the popular movement that it would have in the absence of American attention.
Well, the interesting thing will be to see if that popular support continues in these elections. Well, that was their view. This was indeed Worldview. Join us again next week for another topical discussion.